Good evening and Shavua Tov, everyone. This is our shir for this week, and it's going to be about Parashat Pinchas. And let's just first remind ourselves of the background story, what's going on here. Pinchas appears at the end of the previous parasha, Balak, and again in the beginning of this parasha, which is named after him. And the story, the previous parasha, was all about Balak and Bilam came to curse, but all the most beautiful blessings imaginable came out of his mouth because Hashem put them there. And so the more the previous parasha develops, the more we feel good about ourselves, that we're such a wonderful, amazing people. We have so much kedusha and so much tzniut, and we're so holy and so wonderful. And with each and every blessing, this feeling increases. And then immediately after this whole story ends, and even in the end, it's Bilam himself speaking. It's not even God putting words into his mouth. He's converted himself. And he speaks so highly of us. And then we're told very briefly that after all this, we came to a place called Shittim, which is a very significant name. And then the Moabite women came. And according to Midrashim, it was Bilam who sent them. But according to Pshat, they were just there. And then the Jewish men, started whoring with them. And not only that, but they immediately, as it always happens, the Moabite women encouraged the Jewish men to also worship their idol, which was Baal Peor. And of course, all this was very, very bad. And then to make things even worse, it is said that the chieftain, the Nasi of the tribe of Shimon, Zimri, actually whored with this one particular woman, who was the most important woman there, just in front of the Oel Moed, the tabernacle. And all this was very terrible, and nobody knew what to do. And even Moshe himself, it was said that he forgot a certain halacha, which is a very interesting halacha, because even if he wouldn't have forgotten it, he wasn't allowed to teach it, but he didn't even remember it, which is the halacha that says that if a Jewish man is having intercourse with a non-Jewish woman, then it's permissible for someone who's a zealot, and the word here is kanaim, to kill them. But it's a halacha that must never be taught. It can only happen if someone takes it upon himself to do so. It has to be something spontaneous. It cannot be taught. And Moshe himself didn't even remember this. It was so shocking, everything that happened there. But it's exactly what happened. What happened was that a certain man, Pinchas, who was a priest, Kohen, and the grandson of Aharon, he came and took a spear and killed the two people, the Jewish man and the non-Jewish woman, who were doing this terrible transgression. And it's one of the most, in a way, shocking or violent incidents in the Torah. And a lot of people, modern people with our sensibilities, and we're very much adverse to such spontaneous acts of violence, and for a good reason, because we don't want anarchy. If I have a hard time with this. And then this parasha, which is named after this man Pinchas, actually Hashem starts by blessing him and saying that he did such a wonderful thing. And he says, and the verse that he says is that in Hebrew it goes, Heshivet chamatim al bnei Israel. He has turned back my wrath from the Israelites, because Hashem says I was very angry with the Israelites, but he has turned back my wrath. Heshivet chamati. He made me not be angry anymore. And by displaying among them, and here what it says in Hebrew is bekanoet kinati, by displaying his jealousy, or being jealous in my place. I was jealous. And here we have now this whole class now this evening is going to be about jealousy. But it's a very tricky word, and it's a very tricky concept. And it's actually, in Hebrew, it's one word. In English, it can be several words. One word would be jealousy, and the other word would be zeal. being a zealot is a kanai, but also someone who's jealous. So maybe, I don't know in English if zeal and jealousy, there is a slight similarity if they're connected. In Hebrew, they're absolutely connected. It's the same root, and they go together. So we're going to use Pinchas and his story and his zeal, which was blessed by God and seen very high, spoken very highly of. We're going to try and learn from this about the place of jealousy in relationships, in marital relationships, in a couple, a man and a woman. Because this is really the background here. The background here is that there is a man and a woman, but they're doing something very bad, which is the opposite of a holy matrimony, of blessed, kosher, good, positive relationships, because they're not married, because she's not Jewish, because it's all very profane. And the fact that he has this kind of zeal or jealousy, again, in Hebrew it's the same word, against this means also that he has, there's a flip side, and the flip side is that he's very much passionate about the proper kind of marriage and the proper kind of relationships that should happen. So there's a deep connection between relationships and the kedusha element, the holy element of relationships, of marriage, and jealousy. So that's what we want to explore here. In one of the translations, Bekanoet kinati, that he was jealous, was just, I found this, I think it's an art scroll, that he displaying his passion for me. And then the continuation of the verse is, I did not wipe out the Israelite people in my passion. Again, in Hebrew, it has to do with kin'ah, jealousy or zeal. So we want to go deeply into this concept, this word, kin'ah, and ask a very simple question. Is kin'ah jealousy or zeal? First and foremost, jealousy we want to talk about, and then zeal will connect to this. Is it good or is it bad? That's the simple question. The answer isn't going to be simple, but the question is simple. Is jealousy a good thing or is jealousy a bad thing? And we can very, easily find answers for why jealousy is bad and why jealousy is good. And that probably means that there's a good kind of jealousy and a bad kind of jealousy. But that also we need to try and define and and sort of delineate this whole concept and where it starts, where it ends, and what's good about it, what's bad about it, and so on. So the Torah really helps us in this, in another place, in a different parsha. A few weeks ago, we read Parshat Naso. And in this parsha, one of the many topics of the parsha was the topic of the Sotah. Sotah is the woman who may or may not have been may or may have not been unfaithful to her husband. And it's unclear, and there's this whole ceremony done in the temple to try and clarify whether she was unfaithful or not. And in fact, just the word, the name Sotah, immediately connects to our story, because as I said before, the place that the whole Pinchas incident takes place is called Shittim. Shittim and Sotah come from the same root. Sotah is written not with a samech, but with a sin. In the tractate in the Gemara is written with the samech, but the original word in the Tanakh, in the Torah, is Sotah with a sin. So sin can be also shin. So Sotah could be shota, and has to do with shittim. This is a very important root. It's the root that has to do with the shtut, which is nonsense, being nonsensical. There could be an unholy shtut, which is your yetzer hara, that causes you to do bad things. And there's also a shtut de kedusha, which is a positive kind of shtut, of nonsensical folly. So shtut is folly. Shtut also has to do with straying off the proper path. Listot, that's the sotah, is like someone who strays off the proper path. And in Shittim, the Israelites, the Jewish men, strayed off the path with the Moabite women. So listot is to stray off the path, and it also has to do with being folly. And also, this is the root of the word Satan, right? The devil. Satan, or a wicked angel, is someone who makes you stray off the path. So all this has to, so the Sotah is somehow connected to this place Shittim, and it has to do with straying off the proper path. So when the whole halacha of the Sotah is described, then it's said that And her husband could have something called ruach kin'ah. Ruach kin'ah, again in art school, it's translated as a fit of jealousy, but literally it means a spirit of jealousy. There's a kind of spirit, ruach, of jealousy that passes through him, and he feels that his wife may have been unfaithful. That's it appears to be the pshat. In Chazal's hands, it becomes something completely different, and it becomes a very organized act of, in front of witnesses, telling her that she shouldn't be in a certain place with in a closed place. She shouldn't be in closed doors, behind closed doors, with a very particular person. It's very unemotional. It's not a fit of jealousy. It's not a spirit of jealousy. In Chazal, halachically, it's something very, very rational. There has to be a sort of hava amina, a possibility that she's actually could have a relationship with a very particular person, and then he tells her in front of witnesses, they have to call the witnesses. But the pshat, the way it's written in the Torah, if we don't have Chazal, and we don't have their reading, and we don't have halacha, then we have this image of a man who suddenly has this spirit of jealousy, ruach kin'ah, or fit of jealousy, as one of the translations says. And also in the end of this whole story, this whole sotah incident, this whole sotah issue or topic is called Torat HaKnaot, the Torah of jealousy. So this is very strange. And then Chazal say, because the word ruach kin'ah, spirit of jealousy, appears twice, then they say something very interesting. They have a question. The question is it this kind of spirit or fit or emotion of jealousy, is it a ruach tum'ah or a ruach tahara? Is it a spirit of purity or a spirit of impurity? Now, just having this question in Chazal, that's a very deep, beautiful thing to look at. They're really looking at the emotion jealousy, because ruach kin'ah, spirit of jealousy, that's like saying the emotion of jealousy that passes through me. And they're asking, is this emotion, is this ruach a spirit of purity or of impurity? And just having this question, we should say, it invites us to say that elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. These and these are the words of the living God. They're both real, they're both true. And the fact that Chazal have this question and both options are, available to them, it means there's truth to both. And the fact that the Sota text says twice that he has a spirit of jealousy and she was unfaithful, and he has a spirit of jealousy and she wasn't unfaithful. Just this duality reflects again that this duality is very real. So that gives us the first clue, that there is a positive kind of jealousy, a pure jealousy, and there is a negative kind of jealousy, an impure jealousy, ruach tum'ah, ruach tahara. So, so that gives us the first clue. Now, just to be clear, there's something I didn't say before. I should have said it, and I'm going to say it now. Is just looking at this word jealousy. I said that it has to do with either jealousy or zeal, but we have to make it a little bit more clear before we continue. And that is that there's really at least three meanings to be jealous. So one meaning is to be jealous of someone in the sense that I'm jealous of someone who has a bigger house than I do. And this is a very negative kind of jealousy. And well, at least on a material level. It's always explained that if on a material level, you shouldn't be jealous of anyone. One should be content with one's lot. So what I have, this is good, and I shouldn't be jealous. Spiritually, I should be jealous of other people, because I shouldn't be content with my lot, with the little Torah I know, with the little mitzvah that I do, with the little tzedakah that I give. No, spiritually, or how developed I am spiritually, on a material level, I shouldn't be jealous. On a spiritual level, I should be jealous. It's a good kind of jealousy. This is called kin'at sofrim tarbeh chokhmah, a jealousy of writers, of wise men, increases their wisdom, because they're competing in a good way with one another. So this is the jealousy of the regular jealousy of other people, of what they have materially, which is then bad, or what they have spiritually, which is then a good jealousy. But that's not the jealousy we're talking about. This is just to be clear. The other jealousy we are talking about is jealousy which is like the jealousy of a relationship, what we just spoke about, of the husband being jealous for his wife. He's not jealous of any particular person or man. He's not jealous of someone having who knowing more than him or having more property than him. This is, in Hebrew, it's called not lekane be, which is to be jealous of someone, again, what he has. It's called lekane le. This is a husband jealous for his wife. And the more we come to our generation, it's very symmetrical. It's also women being jealous of their husbands. It has to do with the very big change that has happened, that men only have one wife, and which means that it gives more room for the woman, for the wife, to be also jealous regarding her husband. Today, it's very obvious that men and women can be equally jealous regarding their relationship. So that's the jealousy we're talking about, just to be clear. And then the third kind of jealousy, which is connected, that's what we're trying to understand, is what we call zeal. A zealot is a kanai, and that appears, and that's very similar to a jealousy of the relationship kind of jealousy, except it doesn't go it's not directed towards one's spouse, but it's directed towards a certain ideal or value, usually something religious or something very holy. It doesn't have to be religious, something could be religious-like, could be an ideology. If someone is a zealot regarding their ideology or belief or value or flag or group or religion, then we call them, and it's very, they're jealous of it not being abused, of it not being misrepresented, or it's being cheapened, and so on. And it's very, very similar to a husband being jealous of his wife. And so Pinchas being jealous for God's truth and God's mitzvot. And actually Pinchas was in a way, he was jealous of the ideal of a holy matrimony. So he's really the connection, he's really the connecting point between a relationship jealousy and a jealousy for a religious or spiritual ideal, and so on. So that's what we're exploring. So we have to go back to this. And of course, just to make the question even more acute, is the fact that he was a priest, and that later he was given something called Brit Shalom. He says that the word peace is used regarding what he did, although it's not a peaceful act, it's a very unpeaceful act. But the fact that he was a guardian, that he was jealous of the holiness of matrimony, meant that in the long run, he increased peace or love in the world, the proper kind of love. So the big riddle here again is that Pinchas, being a priest, priests have to do with loving kindness. Kohen has to do with the sphere of chesed, of loving kindness, and the increased love in the world. So how come the person who was the most zealot in the Torah, probably, we can't think in the whole 5 books of, later on maybe, but in the 5 books of Moses, this is probably the sharpest act of personal zeal. So the fact that he's as a figure, as a priestly figure, he's connected with love, again, goes back to our question for this evening, which is how do love and jealousy go together, right? This is the whole thing. Can they go together? Should they go together? Of course, we can think about the verse from Song of Songs, Aza kamavet ahava, kasha kishol kin'ah. Love is as powerful as death, Aza kamavet ahava, and then equally, and it goes together, kasha kishol kin'ah. Kin'ah, jealousy, is as hard or as difficult as hell or as the underworld. And the question is, do they go together or are they the opposite? So many people feel that jealousy is the opposite of love, and many people feel that love without jealousy is not love. So it's amazing, just amazing. It's not only Chazal arguing whether the ruach kin'ah, the spirit of jealousy, is something pure or impure. You just go in the street and ask people, do they think jealousy in relationships is a good thing or a bad thing, and you'll find them divided like across the board completely, with a major group of people telling you very simply that of course jealousy is a part of love, and I want my spouse to be jealous, and if they're not jealous, it's something's wrong. Maybe they don't love me as they should. And then you have a whole other group who will tell you, no, jealousy is the opposite of love. That's like thinking of your partner as belonging to you like an object. And that's very negative. So going back to Chazal, arguing whether this is a pure or impure spirit or emotion, and you have this also reflected in our own society. So that's a very good question to explore. So let's try and figure this out. If Chazal are telling us that there's two kinds of ruach kin'ah, that must mean that elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, both opinions are true, could also be true regarding the people in the street that we just did a virtual survey among them to ask them what they think. So both are true, but it's a question of putting it in order. There are two kinds of jealousy. So let's start with the bad kind of jealousy. There is a bad kind of jealousy. And the people who say that jealousy is the opposite of love, they're not absolutely wrong. There's something they think, it's the question of what they have in mind when they use the word jealousy. But the word jealousy that they have in mind, right, probably, is a negative kind of jealousy. And this is the jealousy that it does not come out of love, about thinking of my spouse as a subject that is a person in and of themselves that I care and I love and I cherish our togetherness and our intimacy and so on. It's thinking about them as really, consciously or subconsciously, as my property, as my belonging, as belonging to me. And this is, again, something very beautiful and interesting in Hebrew, that the word kin'ah, the main two letters here are kuf nun, right? Aleph and Hey, all the letters of Ehevi, Aleph, Hey, Vav, Yud, are not as fundamental to any root that they're in. And they're almost like vowels. So you're left with two consonants, really, which are kuf and nun. And they're the two main consonants also of kinyan. Kinyan is a property, a belonging, something that belongs to me. And so this is a very negative feeling. If you're trying to limit the movement of your spouse in a way that you don't really think about them and you don't think about the relationships, it's just about you having control and you wanting things to be, you want to be in charge, and you want to make sure that the other person bows down to you and doesn't have any free room to make their own decisions. And also you're not trusting them. It goes together with being very suspicious of them. And suspicion is the very opposite of a positive, healthy relationship to the other person, because then you don't treat their soul, their neshama, their inwardness respectfully, because you don't trust them. You don't trust them to make good decisions and to be faithful to you. And you don't trust the love that you have also, the relationship. So all this is a very, very negative kind of jealousy. And there's a verse in Mishlei, in Proverbs, that actually says that kin'ah is akin to, or is identical to, the bones rotting. In Hebrew, it's rakav atzamot kin'ah. Kin'ah, jealousy, is like my bones rotting inside me. It can drive you crazy. It's a very negative verse describing a very negative kind of jealousy. However, if we were just left with this, then it would be a very wrong portrayal of the place of jealousy in relationships, because the other side, the flip side of this, is that there is actually a very good kind of jealousy, which doesn't come out of objectifying the partner, and it doesn't come from trying to control the partner, or of trying to think of my partner, my spouse, as belonging to me, but it absolutely goes together with love, and it's inseparable from love. And that is the feeling of cherishing so deeply the kind of holy bond that we've created, that this is so intimate and so holy and so precious, that the thought of it being made profane, and it being broken, and it being again, made profane in the sense that it's tossed out or thrown out or uncherished, then that is equally powerful as the love itself. And it goes together with, for example, a lot of people ask, if I love God, if I love Hashem, why do I need to have fear? We all know that there's love and fear, but a lot of people say, well, why do I need fear if I love God so much? And one of the most beautiful explanations for a proper kind, Hasidic explanation, for the proper kind of fear of God is that the proper fear is the fear that I will lose my love for God, or that I will lose this loving relationship that I have with God, that I cool down, that I become distant from Hashem, that I forget Hashem. And this is the fear. It's not a fear of God the punisher. It's not a fear of my own sin even. It's the fear of what my sinning will do. My sinning will disconnect me from God. It's very similar. There's a fear and a jealousy of losing the love that we have. And this is why in the Song of Songs, Azaka Mavet Ahava, Kasha Kishol Kinha, they go together, corresponding, paralleling one another, because it absolutely goes together. And the people, the other group in our survey that said that if there's no jealousy, then the love is also, blemished or missing. They're also absolutely true. And now something very nice in Hebrew in Gematria is that if you take the word kin'ah, right, kuf nun aleph hey, and you do the Gematria, it equals 12 times love, right? Kin'ah is ahava, 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 ahava. 12 times love is kin'ah. And why 12, you would say? Then just a little something numerical, right? Every 3-letter word has 6 combinations. Every 4-letter word has 24 combinations. But if those if 2 of those 4 letters are the same, and that's the case in ahava, right? Because there's 2 hey, same goes for God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that it's not 24 combinations, it's 12 combinations. So you can say that the 12 combinations of ahava, you can write ahava in 12 combinations, all varieties of love, all combinations, permutations of love, all 12 combinations, all put together, that's kin'ah, that's jealousy. In this case, jealousy is somehow even higher than kin'ah. Now, we said before that kin'ah has to do with kinyan, which is property. But even the word kinyan could be something very, very positive. Why? Because, in the Torah, kinyan is one of the words for creating the world, right? In Kiddush Levana, we say, Baruch, we bless the moon, and we say, Baruch Osech, who made you, Baruch Yotzrech, who created you, Baruch Borech, who created you ex nihilo, it's another verb, and then the ultimate, the final, highest word is Baruch Konech, and you would think it's he who bought you, but Hashem didn't buy the moon, or he didn't buy the world. It's also said that Hashem is Koneh Shamayim Ve'aretz. That means that's one of the words for creating, but it's actually the highest word. It has to do with the most intimate connection and bond of the Creator and His creation. And it has to do, we said that the 2 letters that kin'ah and kinyan have in common, the 2 consonants, are kuf nun. Just those 2 letters, kuf nun, create the word ken, not as in yes, that's kaf. Ken, kuf nun, is nest. Nest is an image for relationships, for building a home, nesting. And the couple are like 2 lovebirds creating a love nest. And the nest is like a home. It's very intimate. It's a very intimate image. And also in both modern Hebrew and English, you could say that if someone, captivates your heart and you fall in love with him, or not just fall in love with him, you fall for him even in a non-romantic way, just another person, you could say, he bought me. He bought me. What he said was so beautiful, he bought me there, then and there. And it's not a negative thing. And also belonging is not a negative thing, right? So even the word the how we used to explain the negative kind of jealousy, which was the jealousy is associated, connected with kinyan, property or belonging, that also could be, it depends on how you look at it. If you objectify the other person, then this act of belonging or of being someone's property, of course, that's very negative. But if you think about belonging in the sense of it, heimish, homely feeling, that I belong to someone and he belongs to me, it's the sweetest, most emotion there is. And something interesting historically to say about this is that I think the main reason we said that if we go and make a survey in the street, there's a whole group that would say jealousy is the worst thing and it's the opposite of love. Where did they get this idea from? So we said that there's some truth to this, but how come they don't see the other side of this? And I think this historically, this is coming from Marx. The thinker Marx, the Jewish turned Christian, turned very secular thinker, one of the most important thinkers that created secularism. He and his friends and followers, they saw the whole institution of marriage and family as completely having to do with property. They said, why did marriage was created in the first place? Because the father needed to know who his son was, so that he could make sure that his belongings, his property, would inherit. And then the wife became the belonging of the husband, and all this. And the reason they think in this way, completely in this way, is that they're materialist. They're all very materialistic in their thinking, and they can't see the intimate, subjective aspect of belonging. And this brings me to mind something that I've been walking around ever since I was a young man or a teenager, that it's been going around with me as something that I think is very vital for this shiur and this idea. And when I was young, there was this TV series about high school kids. And then there was one episode that has made a very strong impression on me. And in that episode, there was a teacher in the class, and the teacher wanted to teach the students responsibility. And they each got an unboiled egg. And he told them, you have to take this egg with you wherever you go for the following week. And of course, if you don't take care of it, it breaks very easily. So you have to maybe build a bag, or maybe put some, something fluffy to guard it and so on. You have to really take care of it. And you have to take it wherever you're going. You're going to the movies, you're going to parties. You have to take it wherever you go. And you have to bring it back safe and unbroken next week. And that will teach you about responsibility. Very beautiful thing. And maybe teachers should really actually do this. And then what struck me was that the first thing that all the students did, he didn't tell them to do this, but the first thing they did was they drew a face on the egg. And they gave it it became like a person. And this is something amazing for me, because this tells you that when something belongs to you, so the Marxists would say now he becomes an object instead of a subject. But this little image coming from this TV episode is illustrated for me that it operates the other way around. An object becomes a subject once it belongs to you. You care about it. You give it a face. And you go to a store, and there's a row of identical objects, and you take one of them, and then it belongs to you, and then you don't want to replace it for the other object, because now you feel its face, its subjectivity. It becomes part of you. So it's the very opposite. When something belongs to you, when there's a ken, a nest, a kinyan, a bond created, then you could see if it's wrong, if it doesn't work properly, then you treat the spouse as an object. But if you don't think in these terms, and you listen to what happens when you bond, is that the other person becomes a subject. So this is a beautiful image for me of how belonging, and this goes together with jealousy, right? Because the jealousy is that now that we have this bond, that we see each other's faces in such a way that no one else can see, because I see your inner face, because we became very intimate, and we share secrets, and we share a life, and we share our weaknesses with one another. And this gives us a kind of very strong intimacy and bond. The idea that this would be broken or made profane is unbearable, and that makes me jealous of the relationship and of my partner in a very, very good and positive way. So going back to the story and to Pinchas and to what happened there. So there's something to add here. Hashem said that Pinchas heshiv chamati. He has turned back my wrath, right? Now, the word wrath, there's quite a few words for wrath in Hebrew, right? There's kas, in zam, in rogez, And in this case, it's chema. Chema is one of the more extreme words for wrath, just like wrath in English, right? It's one of the more extreme words for anger. So again, you could think that Hashem was angry at us, but now that we've sweetened jealousy, or at least we differentiated between the negative kind of jealousy, which objectifies the partner and which wants to control them, and which has really to do with your own fears and your own inability to be trustful and to give room to the other person. And the other kind of very positive jealousy, we can now try and connect more the jealousy with zeal, right? Because as we said, if the love is powerful, if the is azak mavit ahava, then the kin'ah should also be equally strong, just like the word that we have here, wrath. So God talks about kin'ati, my jealousy or zeal, and he talks about chemati, another interesting, beautiful thing in Hebrew. So we have chema. Chema is, as I said, wrath or anger, has to do with the word cham, which means hot or warm, because when you get angry, you get hot. So if this is negative, it's negative. But in this case, it's very positive. It's a very positive kind of heat. So something very beautiful. If you look for the word wall, in English, there's only one word, it's wall. But in Hebrew, there are quite a few words, right? There's kotel in the Western Wall. And there are two more words for wall, which are kir, that's the simplest word, and choma. Kir and choma. Now, something very interesting is going with these two words. Kir has to do with kol, which is coldness, and choma has to do with chom, which is warmth. So it's just like we have two kinds of jealousy, we have two kinds of walls. And it goes together because jealousy is creating a nest, a boundary, a wall around the relationship. So if this is a negative kind of jealousy, it would be a kir, a cold wall. And it's very cold, it's unintimate, it's very, because it doesn't emerge or grow out of the warmth, the warm heart of the relationships. But if it's a good wall, right? The survey we would make, if people would say walls are bad, the same people would say jealousy is bad, they would say walls are bad. And the people who would say jealousy is good, they would say walls are good, the boundaries, they guard you. And again, we have these two aspects. There's a good wall, there's a bad wall, which is cold, kir, kor, and there's a good wall, which is choma, chom. It preserves the heat. It makes sure the heat doesn't dissipate, doesn't get lost. And this is what we have here. So when Hashem is saying that Pinchas heshiv chamati, cheimati, he has brought back my wrath, or turned back my wrath, we can also read this as he brought back my wall, the positive, warm kind of wall, the choma that preserves the heat of the relationship. So the outer aspects, when you look at it from a distance, you see a wall. And from the distance, you can't see if it's a kir or a choma, if it's cold or warm, if it's like a prison, or is it like a home. But when you look at it from the inside, and then you see that this act of zeal, of this zealot, is coming from a very deep and positive kind of warmth. He's trying to preserve the positive, good wall, and the positive and good jealousy that guards, preserves the heat of relationships. And if there's no jealousy in the relationships, then it's also very cold. It's cold if there's a negative kind of jealousy, and it's also cold if there's no jealousy. You have to have the positive, good kind of jealousy, which builds like a firewall. That's another beautiful image that is used in one of the prophets, that Hashem says that he will be, for the Jewish people, chomat esh. I will be a firewall. Again, choma, not kir or kotel. I will be a chomat esh. I will create a firewall around you that guards you. It's a beautiful image of the positive kind of jealousy, which again, like fire, has to do with zeal. Otherwise, it isn't real. The love isn't real. It's not authentic. It's not candid. So this is very important. Now, just to wrap this all up, this whole thing happens in shittim, right? And we said shittim has to do with straying off their path or of being folly in a negative way. And the thing is that I mentioned before, there's a holy folly. And the holy folly is when you do things that are irrational, they don't make sense. If you think about them rationally, you wouldn't do them. But it's very important, and this Torah is full of holy folly stories. What Tamar did was holy folly. When Rivka taught her son to disguise himself as Esav, it's a lot of things that they do, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and also in Chazal, and of course in Hasidic stories all the time, is what they do is holy folly. They do things that are crazy, they dance and they sing, and all of Hasidut is one big holy folly, because rationally you wouldn't be a Hasid, you would just be a kosher Jew, and you wouldn't go and do it but a doot, and you wouldn't go and dance and do, you turn on your head over your head, and you wouldn't do farbrengens because irrational. But Shtut B'Kedusha is very important. And the whole point of this shiur is that being jealous is also jealous in a good way regarding your spouse is also a holy folly. And that's the only thing that can really protect us. If we would say that the Israelites whoring with the Moabite women was a yetzer hara, and then we rectified this by being very, kosher and doing what we should do, not what we shouldn't do, he would just come back. You would have children that would be again attracted to idol worship or to immodest things, and because there's something very attractive about shtut, folly, straying off the path. That's a vital part of the way the soul works. So you have to be a holy madman, a holy shoteh. And being a holy madman is going crazy for God and crazy for your relationship. And that also goes with being jealous, is you can't stand when the holiness of and it has to do, of course, with modesty. And, people say, why are the Dati'im, the religious people, or the Haredim people, why are they so crazy with their tzniut? They're so tzanua. And you can be, in the middle, and you're okay, the word doesn't, it's not, the world is not just a nudist beach that you have to go in the opposite direction. You can be somewhere in the middle. But that's not understanding the reason the religious people go crazy for the tzniut thing. And of course, you can also, just like there's a negative kind of jealousy, you can also go crazy in a negative way for tzniut. But if you do it in a right way that comes out of the inside of you and remembering the inside of the other person, and it goes with trust, and it doesn't go with coercion, it goes with a lot of room, because the negative jealousy is when you're not giving the other person room, you're trying to control them. But if you don't have this control freak element, which makes it bad, and you don't have the objectifying element, again, both jealousy and tzniut, they really go together, because tzniut is all about creating this firewall around the holy aspect of the intimate union. So, but if you don't have all those negative things of the cold walls of being detached and not having trust and being objectifying and being a control freak, if you take all this out of the equation, then you should. And that's what the generally the religious Orthodox world does, is go crazy for tzniut and for guarding the intimacy in a very good way. You have to distill it, you have to refine it, so that all the negative elements of the negative kind of jealousy are not there. But if you do this kind of refining, you're left with a passionate jealousy, which is very, very positive. It's a sign of life. It's a sign of being really connected to what's holy about Judaism, and what's holy about the Torah, and what's holy about relationships, and what's holy about the body, and what's holy about intimacy, and not being mild about it, not being cool about it. If you're cool about it, then that's the worst thing in the world, because you're missing out on the heat of life in a very deep way, and the heat of the soul, and the heat of what's meaningful in this world. And so again, the only way to rectify what happened in Shittim, to rectify the shtut de klipa, the klipa, unimpure kind of folly that caused the Israelites to go after the Moabite women, it can only be rectified with a holy kind of craziness and folly, which is going all the way with this kind of very good jealousy, which is really an aspect of love. It just absolutely goes together with love. The two cannot be separated. They absolutely go together, and that strengthens the brit shalom, the covenant of peace between a man and a woman, and between ourselves and Hashem, we the woman, he the man. It's all one big relationship that needs to be guarded with the firewall of kedusha, jealousy. So that's our hitbonenut for this week.